Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
We're tracking the story surrounding Lisa Cook with reporting today that the Fed governor's lawyer could file a lawsuit against the administration after President Trump moved to have her fired. This is just one of the stories that we're going to be talking about with Joe Lavorgna. Told you he was coming in. Counselor to the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, former economic advisor to President Trump in the first administration, just walked over on a beautiful day in Washington. It doesn't get any nicer than this. Thanks for coming by. It's always a pleasure to see you. This is pretty interesting. The moment that we're in here involving Lisa Cook, because there are a lot of questions about process. This is going to go to court apparently now. What about due process? Why are we moving to fire someone who's not been charged with anything?
If you look at the Federal Reserve Act, it does say for cause,
right.
And it looks like those forms were not filled out accurately, that they were filled out improperly. And this is why Secretary Bessent highlighted why he believes the Fed should do an internal probe. The law may not be clear where it dots everything out, where there has to be a specific process. It says for cause. The president believes he has cause. Certainly, you have to take these things very seriously, given the fact the Fed is a regulator, and we'll see where it goes.
Don't you want to know if he has cause, though? I mean, is it up to the president to say that something was wrong?
Yes, I do.
Here?
I think so, Joe. And as Secretary Bessent alluded to, Governor Cook has not said she didn't do it. And that's maybe perhaps is quite important. The Fed, look, we need trust in government, and the president came in. He wanted to make things more efficient, streamline, get rid of the bloated bureaucracy. We're seeing that. We're seeing government spending slow pretty significantly. We've seen a lot of excess federal jobs go by the wayside. He actually wants to bring trust back to institutions. We've had other episodes in the past where Fed governors have had to resign. Because of alleged improprieties. And this one certainly could be quite serious, and it's the president's prerogative, and I believe he has the ability, because, again, it's for cause, and it looks like these things are pretty serious, to basically do what he's doing.
The administration willing to go to the Supreme Court on this?
Well, we'll see what happens. We have to see how the law plays itself out and going through that process. I don't know. I'm not being a lawyer, not knowing how it's going to work, but the president certainly, I think, has a good reason to be concerned about what's happened. And this notion somehow about Fed independence, remember, whoever is ultimately confirmed for the Fed chair, for Adriana Kugler's position, and possibly Ms. Cook's position, has to go through Senate approval. So this notion somehow that there's a hit to Fed independence is a bit misleading and out of context, because whoever is chosen will have to be vetted properly.
And I guess Stephen Myron will have a confirmation hearing next week. Is that what you expect?
It's supposed to be moved up. So fingers crossed. Hopefully that happens soon.
Did that conversation just get a little more difficult for him? Democrats are going to come out swinging on this, aren't they?
Well, the problem is the Democrats have not supported any of the president's picks to begin with. So I'm not sure that really matters.
So it's the same prep if you're Stephen Myron.
I would think so, yeah. And he's got a very good record, and he was already confirmed just back in March.
Right.
So it's like, what's changed? So I would hope that goes through smoothly and that Stephen gets it. He'd be a great governor.
Bloomberg News reporting late yesterday, Bloomberg Scoop, that the president wants to go further and actually start to affect the makeup of the 12 regional banks. Is that the next layer here? Because that will bring up a whole other conversation about independence.
Possibly. I mean, the thing is,
does he want to reshape the Fed to
I think
to
the
his
Fed
own
needs
likeness?
to be. I mean, the Fed probably needs some serious overhaul and reshaping. I mean, the fact that the governors have basically agreed to every president, I think, in the history with which they've been, actually the ability to not have a president get that position just shows the fact that everything has been rubber stamped. And the presidents aren't really going through a democratic process in that sense, right? It's a private, sort of quasi-private entity elects these people to the reserve banks, and then the Board of Governors then kind of approves it. I like what the president's trying to do. He's trying to have a very populist, very, everyday American, everyman approach, so to speak, to policy making, where he wants to lift up Main Street, and the Fed oftentimes is perceived to be, a globalist, elitist institution. That's a perception that the institution has, and I think even the Fed itself would probably admit that there's been some overreach, and Secretary Bessent has said that, and they want the Fed to go back to kind of its core mission of low and stable inflation, full employment, and moderate and low interest rates.
We're going to get interest rate cut or cuts starting in September, according at least to market expectations. There's a worry, though, that if the president puts a chill across the Fed, that the Board of Governors may not always be acting on data, that it may be influenced by the president. Why do you doubt that?
Well, a couple of reasons, Joe. One is you had two governors dissent, and they dissented before we had that employment report, which showed massive downward revision. So there were very strong cases to be made why rates should be lower before that meeting. And then, of course, those governors, Bowman and Waller, certainly their case, I think, is more strong. The chair himself has said, look, interest rates are high relative to the neutral rate, they're high even relative to the highest dot on the dot plot. So the Fed has put itself in a position where it needs to be accountable for its forecasts and for what it's saying. Factually, their inflation forecasts have gone up from March to June as inflation dipped slightly lower, so their forecast error got wider. The bond market is telling you that there's not an inflation problem. Break-even inflation is well contained. The 10-year note is well contained. So there's nothing in the markets who are forward-looking that's worried at all about Fed independence. I think the president and Secretary Bessent has been echoing this, really want to bring accountability, get rid of the mission creep, and reevaluate, sort of get back to the basics of what the Fed is supposed to do. I don't look at that as being at all an attack on independence, but rather, okay, let's fix this situation, which had gotten a bit broken over the past dozen and a half years.
You mentioned inflation. There are still questions about when this is going to start showing up in consumer data. The market did get a bit spooked by the PPI, suggesting that, maybe it's actually finally here. This is the threshold before it spills over on the retail side. Is that going to happen? And if not, who's eating this?
So the PPI was a bit higher than expected. That was after 5 months of very weak readings. Some of that was in things like retail services, which actually are margins from company to company. The CPI has not shown that inflation. Goods prices since the president took office are down 0.4% annualized. Since April, when all the tariff actually accelerated, inflation is still barely positive. So I don't think, Joe, we're seeing any of the tariff effect yet. Maybe it shows up at some point. But I'd argue, given the fact that we're debating whether there is a tariff effect, is proof positive that clearly it was not anywhere near as bad as all the experts and pundits thought. Yeah. The president said that we've got the leverage, that our trading partners are largely going to eat those tariffs, and I think that's exactly what's happened.
Before you leave, I have to ask you about NVIDIA, because it's NVIDIA Day. We've got the earnings coming, and your boss was talking about it earlier today, knowing that the government is taking a 10% stake in Intel. Should we have a stake in the world's most valuable chip maker, NVIDIA? Scott Bessent was asked about it on Fox earlier. Listen.
I don't think NVIDIA needs financial support, that seems not on the table right now. I don't know if we need to take stakes in defense companies. We'll see whether the defense companies are fulfilling their mission in terms of providing adequate and timely deliveries for the U.S. military.
How does in our remaining moment, the conservative Republican inside of you feel about government stakes in publicly traded companies?
The Intel is a unique situation because the Science and Chips Act under the prior administration gave significant amounts of money. So you feel like we bought that stake already? Yeah, that stake, and that's why. So I look at Intel as being a very unique case.
What about a Lockheed or something else?
The secretary has said, look, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
He's not made any type of commitment to do that. I think people are conflating Intel, or you thinking that's going to be a blueprint for other places. And I think in this case, Intel is unique because of the grants they were getting, and the administration properly thought that, look, the taxpayer could benefit much more with the upside of actually converted to a non-voting equity stake.
Fascinating. It's always great to spend time with you, Joe. Enjoy the walk back to the Treasury Department. It's only a couple blocks from here. Joe Lavorgna, counselor to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.